What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back, and as always, thank you for joining me. My name's Paul Brettel. Today we're going to discuss Packers-Bears upcoming matchup, but we're going to focus on big picture, what the Packers should be focused on heading into this game with, obviously, the playoffs on the horizon. Second part of this video, assuming we got time, we'll dive into briefly Keisean Nixon, his performance, his play, and obviously the impact moving forward of knowing that Jair Alexander is not going to be coming back this season. But first, before we do all that, you know what to do. Hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I greatly appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. Find all my work, including the article versions of what we're discussing here today, over at ESPNLacrosse.com. And my Wisconsin sports fans out there, Packers, Brewers, Bucks, Badgers, download the 105.5 ESPN Lacrosse app for all your Wisconsin sports radio needs. Find me on Sports Lead 3 to 6, Monday through Friday, multiple days per week. So like I said, let's start with what I think, big picture, what the Packers' focus should be going into this Chicago Bears game. And for me, it's about momentum. It is about making sure that they put their best foot forward, that they put on film a really strong performance in that Bears game. Particularly, I think that's particularly important because of what we saw this past Sunday against the Minnesota Vikings. And Matt LaFleur, in his own words, called it sloppy. All three phases, the Packers' performance in that game. A few previous videos since that Vikings game, we discussed what went wrong on offense, what went wrong on the defensive side of the ball. Matt LaFleur also said that there's a lot to clean up, and I think that there is a ton of value in peaking, playing your best at this time of the year. And so especially coming off of just how the team performed overall against the Vikings, I think there's a lot of value in how they go about preparing this week, how they perform on the field on Sunday against the Chicago Bears, even though, and we'll touch on it here in a bit, there's not a ton at stake for the Green Bay Packers in this game against the Chicago Bears. But against that Vikings team in that game, we saw a lot of the same issues that have plagued the Packers throughout the season, and particularly against the NFC's best opponents. A slow start on offense, penalties. The word that I used to describe the Packers' performance, particularly on offense, was disjointed. The pass rush was lacking. They were attacked over the middle of the field. A lot of those same lingering issues that we talked about the last time they played the Vikings, the last time they played the Lions, were again on display in this past Sunday's game. And as I mentioned, peaking at the right time. And this is something that GM Brian Gutekunst spoke about during the bye week when he met with us, and just the importance, not just for the Packers, but every team is striving to be playing their best football at this time of the year. And the 2023 Green Bay Packers are a prime example of the importance of that, right? On paper, you had a 9-8 team. You had a 7th seed in the NFC. You had a team that was fighting just to even get to the playoffs. That was on paper. On the football field, especially on offense, that 2023 Packers team this time of the year was operating as one of the best units in the NFL. So they go into Dallas, get a huge victory. They're on the cusp of going to the NFC Championship game against the San Francisco 49ers. They were playing their best football at that time. And for this current version of the Packers team, while I do believe that since the bye week they've continued to, for the most part, and again, we've talked about it, there's things to clean up, but I do think that for the most part they were trending in the right direction. But that momentum they had established, that was knocked away, that was taken back, again, based on last week's performance. And again, you're going up against one of the best teams in football on the road. It's going to be tough to win. But taking the wins or loss out of the equation against the Vikings team, again, it's how that game unfolded. It's how the Packers performed. That is the aspect of all this that you got to take a step back and say, hey, we got to correct this. We have to overcome this because this is not going to fly once we get to the playoffs and are playing Vikings, Lions, Eagles, whoever it might end up being. So Packers are still searching for that consistency. And having said all this, I want to be very, very clear. There's obviously been a ton of good that has come from this Packers team this season. I mean, they have the opportunity to win on Sunday, get to 12 wins. It's a very, very good season. They had 5 games going into that Vikings game where they had scored 30 points or more on offense. 5 straight games. That is a very, very difficult feat to hit. And even in the Vikings game, they still got to 25 points in that game. However, the consistency of it all, and again, it's for a lot of the things that we mentioned, the slow start, penalties, pass rush, middle of field defense, all those aspects, but the consistency has been struggling. Yes, they put up 25 against the Vikings. They put up 31 against Detroit the last time they played the Lions, but a lot of that production, a lot of those points came in the second half of the game. Slow starts. Against Seattle, I've brought this up a few times. Overall, a very good performance from the Packers, from the offense. I think they scored, 34 points in that game. But there was a 4-possession stretch in the third quarter where the Packers went punt, fumble, punt, turnover on downs. Now, of course, you're not going to score every possession, right? Not every possession is going to be this 8, 10 play, 70-yard drive. But those 4 possessions back to back, totaling just 15 plays. Those are quick possessions too, right? That's not stringing together some first downs. We have to punt. Those are quick possessions. You do that against Detroit. You do that against Philadelphia, the Vikings in the playoffs. It's that type of stretch, third quarter, that can send you home, right? Because those offenses can put up a lot of points. That could be the difference from going into that possession tied to, all right, we're down multiple scores, or going to that possession with a lead to, all right, now we're tied or we're even trailing. So those stretches cannot happen. In the New Orleans game, Packers won 34-0 in that game. But the general theme in that post-game press conferences, locker room, all that after the game was that, particularly from the offense, was that there's still more out there for this group. And again, that's the big thing, that the second half of the season, as good as things have been at times, that they're still chasing that consistency. The pieces of the puzzle are absolutely there. The big question is, because we just, again, against the top flight opponents, haven't seen it, is can those pieces of the puzzle come together? Can we see that steady 60-minute, 4-quarter performance? Can we see the Packers' best players in these must-have-it games play their best football? Because again, that's another part of this equation against the Lions, the Vikings, Eagles, that has been lacking. So looking at Sunday's game, the approach to it, Matt LaFleur said early on in the week that his messaging to the players is that they should be prepared to play all 4 quarters of this game. And this is a bit of a different approach than what he did during the 2021 season. 2021, Packers had the bye locked up going into the last game of the season. I think they were playing the Lions in week 18 of that year. But regardless, going into that final game, again, bye is locked up for the Packers. He told the starters, you're going to play till halftime in that game. I'm going to sit you the second half. They went through that process. 2 weeks later, after the bye, 49ers come to Lambeau Field. Packers lose in a devastating fashion in the playoffs. They're sent home early. And obviously Matt LaFleur doesn't think that, and he said this, that how he handled the Lions game and telling the players ahead of time, hey, you're only going to play till half. He doesn't believe that one decision ultimately had the trickle-down effect of them losing to the 49ers 2 weeks later. But he did say it left a sour taste in his mouth. Just kind of that sequence of how those few weeks went. So this time around, he's of the mindset, and he's told the team, plan on playing all 4 quarters to make sure that the preparation, everything, that this is just a normal week for them, right? This is a normal week, NFC North opponent. You want to win all of those games. It's the Chicago Bears. Packers have a 12-game win streak. They obviously want to keep that going as well. Keep this week as normal as possible. Now, when we get to Sunday, are things going to play out that way? Are we going to see Jordan Love for all 4 quarters? I think that's the part where it's going to be fluid, right? It's going to be depending on how things unfold. Now, how I would do it is if the Washington-Dallas game is close throughout, because if Washington loses, the Packers win, they can be the 6th seed. If Washington wins or Green Bay loses, Green Bay's a 7th seed in the playoffs. So if Dallas is hanging around with Washington, I think you're going to keep your starters in, right? Just to make sure that you have the opportunity that if Washington does lose, that you can win your game and be the 6th seed in the playoffs. Not a huge difference, because either way, 6th seed, 7th seed, you're going on the road. You're going up against really good offenses, but I think there's value in being the 6th versus a 7. So that's scenario 1. Washington-Dallas game is close. You keep your starters in as long as you need to ensure that you get the victory in case Dallas comes away with the win. That's scenario 1. Scenario 2. Washington is up multiple scores on the Cowboys. So what do you do for this Packers game? This would be my approach. If the offense has put together a really good, and the defense, the team as a whole, but the offense has put together 2 really good quarters of football, right? It's clean, it's efficient, they're moving the ball, they're putting up points, we're not seeing the pre-snap penalties, the run game, the passing game's marrying together. it looks like a performance that you would expect an 11-win team to have against a Bears team that's struggling. If that's the case, and again, Washington's losing, then I would be comfortable at that point in the second half saying, all right, we're going to put some of our backups in. On the flip side, Washington-Dallas game, regardless of where it's at, doesn't matter. But if the offense is sputtering, right, if they're struggling, if they look like a team that's focused on the playoffs the next week ahead, not so much on the task at hand in beating the Chicago Bears, I'm going to play them into the second half. Again, that's what I would do because I really, really believe, and LaFleur's mentioned it, Jordan Love's mentioned it this week, but I really, really believe there's so much value in the momentum you can establish in this last week of the season in the level of play that you reach, right? Putting good football on tape, going out there and executing at a high level. I really believe there's a ton of value in that because as we've seen in the past with other Packers teams that have been 13-win teams but struggle once the postseason arrives because they maybe aren't necessarily playing their best football in January. So I would make sure that everything is done to go out there to end the regular season on the right foot, to not have that sour taste in your mouth coming off the field in week 18 and going into the playoffs on the right foot with some momentum. Again, that's how I would approach it. And then another wrinkle to all this that Matt LaFleur mentioned, and again, is the injury report. They have 2 players questionable, Brenton Cox and Christian Watson, and 4 players who have already been ruled out. There's only so many of your starters, right, that you can sit. There's only 48 players who are active on game days. There's only so many, there's still a number of snaps that have to go around. So it's not as if every starter is going to get this game off or is going to get pulled early in the game. Matt LaFleur is going to have to be strategic about where those players who do maybe get the third or fourth quarter off in this game, where those snaps are coming from, right? Because again, not all the key players are going to be able to sit. Depends on depth of position. Depends on other factors as well, where injuries are, things of that nature. But it's just another wrinkle to all this. Even if the Packers look extremely well for 2 quarters, even if Washington is blowing out the Dallas Cowboys, it's not as if everyone's going to sit. There's still going to be key productive starters who are going to have to play in this game. So, like I said, down the road, whether the 6th seed, 7th seed, Detroit, Minnesota, Philadelphia, Tampa Bay, all ranked top 10 in the NFL this season in scoring. They're all top 10 in yards per pass attempt. Chances are Packers are going to be up against a team in the playoffs where their opponent on the opposite side of the Packers offense is able to put up points. Green Bay is going to need to put up points. They're going to need to have that ability to put up touchdowns, not field goals, to extend drives, not have short possessions, and not get off to slow starts. So that's what I would have in mind going into this game, the importance of putting on film a strong performance, particularly coming off of what we saw last week, and rolling with that momentum into the playoffs. All right, now before we get out of here, let's talk about Keisean Nixon a little bit. His versatility, playing nickel, playing outside, has been extremely valuable for the Green Bay Packers defense this season. And Derek Ansley, Packers defensive backs coach, was talking on Thursday. What we see from Nixon, whether it's week to week playing the slot versus playing the boundary or in game like we saw against the Vikings where he has to make that position change, that's not common. Ansley said that in his time at the college level, he spent a lot of time coaching teams within the SEC. He goes, he saw it happen there where you'd see a player bounce from the boundary to the nickel as needed. He goes, not at the NFL level. Those are 2 very separate positions. They're both, yes, in the cornerback category, so to speak, but those are 2 very separate positions. So you just don't see that happen at the NFL level, or at least not Ansley hasn't his experience of bouncing from the inside, bouncing from the outside like Keisean Nixon has. So I want to start there and just highlighting that what we're seeing from him on a week-to-week or sometimes series-to-series play and where he's asked to line up, not normal around the NFL. Now, when we saw Nixon start doing this was in week 4 earlier this season where we saw him both playing from the slot and playing from the boundary. We got glimpses of this during the training camp practices. Most of his time during training camp was spent in the nickel, but there were instances, especially with the second team defense, I think, to get him some reps where they would have him out there on the boundary just to get that experience. And Ansley also has mentioned in the past that when he first arrived, during the offseason with Jeff Hafley, and they're evaluating kind of who they have on the defensive side of the ball, what skill sets they have to work with. Hansley said that one of the things that really stood out about Nixon was, and this is Hansley's words, was the unique skill set that he has, again, to be able to handle the inside responsibilities as well as the outside responsibilities. And then after that week 4 period, again, where he got his first taste of playing on the boundary in the regular season, that very quickly became KeShawn Nixon's role moving forward, as long as everyone was healthy in the secondary or at the nickel position, at the safety position. And while for our perspective, right, because where we saw KeShawn Nixon defensively in a Packers uniform was in the slot. That's how he got on the field last season during the 2023 year, was playing at the nickel, because the Packers had at that time a surplus of boundary options, right? They had Jair, Eric Stokes, Rasul Douglas was here at that time. They drafted Carrington Valentine. So for Nixon, his path to seeing the field on defense was playing the slot, which for him, that was the transition, right? From our perspective, again, we see him playing mostly in the nickel, and now he's on the boundary. But for him, he said the boundary is his natural position. His first 3 years in the NFL with the Las Vegas Raiders, that was the position he was primarily asked to play. So last year when he was asked to go inside, that's where the biggest transition was for KeShawn Nixon. That's not something, wasn't completely new to him, but also, like you said, the nickel wasn't his natural position. So now being asked to bounce back to the boundary, that's been a pretty smooth transition for him. And we've really seen the value of that versatility the last month. Javon Bullard, Packers starting nickel, has missed time, so that's forced KeShawn Nixon to move inside. This past game, Zane Anderson had to exit the game early with a concussion. So Bullard, who was in the slot, Nixon, who was on the boundary, that forced Bullard back to safety, forced Nixon into the slot position. And this week, Evan Williams has already been ruled out for this game against the Bears. So Nixon's versatility and ability to just jump back and forth between those two positions has, especially this last month as the Packers have dealt with injuries, been extremely valuable. And some of the differences, right, between playing the boundary and playing the nickel, when you're inside, the fight comes to you a lot quicker. I mean, it is all reactionary at that time because you're so close to the ball, you're so close to the line of scrimmage, that everything happens so quickly from the nickel position. In addition to that, you're utilized as a blitzer. Obviously, you're closer to the quarterback and the running back, so your ability to help out in the run game is at a much greater premium when you're playing the nickel. Now, whereas on the boundary, there's a little bit more read and react, right? You're on an island. It's you by yourself. Obviously there can be safety help at times, but for the most part, it's up to you, right? You're not in the congested middle part of the field. It's you out there one-on-one with a wide receiver, and you got to do everything in your power to not get beat and give up that big play. But there's also a little bit more time to be reactionary, right? You can see the route that's unfolding from the receiver that's across from you. You can read what the quarterback's doing to get an idea of maybe what's coming, where the ball might go. So again, they're both cornerback positions by title, but two very, very different positions. Like we talked about with Javon Bullard jumping from the nickel position to the safety position. Yeah, it's under that defensive back umbrella, but two very, very difficult positions. On the season, KeShawn Nixon has generated 9 pressures as a blitzer, and he has 4 in the last 4 games that the Packers have had. Been a super, super reliable tackler. According to Pro Football Focus, he's made 82 of his 90 tackle attempts this season. That's one of the areas, his willingness, ability as a run defender, that Jeff Hafley has praised him in. And then in coverage, done an excellent job of limiting big plays, whether it's getting beat over the top, whether it's just being a sure tackler when there are receptions to limit yards after the catch opportunities. Nixon's allowing just 9.1 yards per catch this season, and especially when talking about a boundary cornerback. Anytime a boundary cornerback's giving up under 10 yards per catch, they're doing a really, really good job, again, of limiting those big plays. He also has 6 pass breakups and an interception. Matt LaFleur said a couple weeks ago that Nixon took his game this season to another level compared to where it had previously been. So obviously looking ahead, week 18, looking ahead to the playoffs, we know Jair Alexander no longer going to be a part of that Packers cornerback equation. So like we talked about in the previous video, continued heavy reliance on Carrington Valentine, Eric Stokes, and their roles in the potential success that the Packers are going to have this postseason. But KeShawn Nixon, he's going to continue to be cornerback 1 for this Packers team, and he's absolutely ready for it. And again, that versatility that he's brought to this defense, showcased over and over again this season, has proven to be extremely valuable for the Packers. So there you have it, my friends. If you made it this far in the video, you might as well hit like. You might as well hit subscribe. I do greatly appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. Find all my work over at ESPNLacrosse.com. Download the 105.5 ESPN Lacrosse app. Until next time, friends, take care.